This is literally everything there is to know about sub-items within Monday.com. The video is going to start super simple, and as we go through the video, it will escalate in complexity. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We would love to help. So as you can see here, I'm inside of our Monday.com system. Now, firstly, you might be wondering, well, what exactly is a sub-item? So sub-items within Monday.com are kind of what they say on the tin. They are sub a parent item, okay? So you can see here, we've got this really important task, and then we are able to create sub-items associated with this really important task. And you can do so by hovering over any task on any board anywhere in Monday.com, and you'll see this very faint arrow just on the left hand side. You can expand this, and then this will create a sub-item. Now, sub-items are primarily used for tasks associated with the parent task or the parent item. Unfortunately, in life, as I'm sure you know, in order to complete one task, there are a series of sub steps that need to be done. This is typically where we would use sub items to manage those. So I'll go ahead and write in, let's say, example sub item number 1, and then hit enter. So now we can see at the top, if we close this down again, we've got an indicator of the number of sub items associated with that particular task. And then it's really easy to open up the sub items by using the arrow just on the left hand side here. And then we'd be able to easily see all of the sub items. Now, the setup is practically identical to the parent item. You can see here we've got an owner, and I can assign a sub item to someone else that isn't the person assigned to the parent item. I can also change the status and have a status column and add and remove labels accordingly. And then I also have a date column here. Now I've got this basic date functionality. I can also click into the 3 dotted button on the date column, go to settings, and then set this as a deadline. And then by associating it with both a status and an owner column, and then connecting those columns, I then thus create a due date for this particular sub-item set here. So now I could go ahead and change the status to done, and you can see how that puts a ruler through it. Or if it's doing, it will stay as open. If I change the date to be the 4th, or then it will show me, or at least indicate, that this particular sub-item is behind schedule. Okay, so I'm just going to mark this as done for the time being. So this is the real basics, all right? So just think, example task for this parent item, add a sub-item, assign an owner, got a status, and when is it due. Now, to improve this somewhat, we can go ahead and also add additional columns. So we press the plus button on the right hand side, and we just hit more columns, and you can see here we have got an array of options. They are literally identical to the options on the parent item. So we've got status, we've already got a status column. You've got a priority if you want to prioritize your tasks. Now typically I just see everyone puts the task as critical. It might just be me, but most people default to that. You've got a label, which is practically identical to a status, slight differences. People, we've already got, we've got numbers. So if you, let's say, wanted to manage line items for a quote or an invoice on a sub-item level, which is a nuanced use case for sub-items, you could add a numbers column. Alternatively, if you are managing effort associated with each sub-item, and if you're not familiar with effort, resource, and capacity, you can check out the video linked above if I actually do get around to linking it. We can add this to the board, and then we could just assign, let's say, effort, and say that this particular sub item is a level 1 effort, which if in case you're not familiar, and I'll just run through this very briefly, we define effort within Monday.com using a numbers column, and then when that effort is assigned to a particular person, they are then allocated that amount of effort. And you can have effort as in days or in hours or in minutes if you wanted to. I typically default to 1, so 1 effort being 1 day, 0.5 effort being half a day, and then we can really easily manage that in the resource and capacity tracker within Monday.com. But if we go back to the plus button, we just look at some additional columns we have here. We've got the timeline and the date column. Now, they're very similar, timeline and date column. The only difference is the timeline means you can extend the date from across multiple days, whereas the date column is a singular date. You've got text and a long text. So you might add a long text as, let's say, a task description. Hit enter. Again, if we add some additional columns here, and I'm just going through the basics, we've got a connect boards column, which I'm going to come on to in a moment's time. We've got a checkbox, and then we've got a link, as you can clearly see, like a simple hyperlink to any website, a world clock if you want it, a unique item ID. We've got a phone column, a location column, files column. These are all things I'm sure you're probably already familiar with on the parent level. We've got tags, rating, creation log, last updated, auto number, progress tracking. And then we've got button, drop down, week, country, formula, blah, 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 blah. Now, the two really interesting ones that I do want to cover in this video for sub items, and I think is pertinent to know for sub items, is first dependency. So in case you're not familiar, you can make one task dependent on another, but this is quite typical to see on a sub item level. So if I add example sub item number 2 and hit enter, that's my second sub item associated with this parent task. But I want to say that example sub item number 2 is actually dependent on example sub item number 1. So in order for me to do number 2, I need number 1 to be done. And we can add this very easily using the dependent column. We press the plus button and just set the dependency. So it's really easy to do. And then this becomes really beneficial when we're using Gantt charts, which is a separate video, but you'd then be able to see a line that connects one sub item to another sub item and the dependencies and kind of how it flows down over the weeks and months that the work's being done. So the other column that's pertinent to note is actually the connect boards column. So what we're able to do by using the connect boards column is connect from a sub item level to an item level. So we can connect the sub items of the tasks to the parent of the projects. Now, unfortunately, what we can't do is we can't do sub item of tasks to sub item of projects. But like I said, you could do sub item of tasks to the parent item on the project level. So what we would do is we press select boards and we'll select the project, the projects board, make sure we press create two-way connection, then connect the boards, and then we'll be able to link the projects to sub items. You can't actually do this on the inverse either. So you couldn't, I was on the projects level, I couldn't create a connection column to the sub item of the tasks from here. You have to do it from the sub item level. And like I said, a lot of people don't know this. So you can see that this has now created a connection. I've got sub item of tasks, and then I can link this particular project to both example sub item number 1 and example sub item number 2. And then I would open this and you can see how they're both connected. Now, where this gets a little bit more interesting is obviously I can then mirror data over. So I can use a mirror column, connect it to my connect boards column. Monday's being a bit glitchy today. So am I in all fairness. And then we connect the mirror column to the projects column. And you can see here that if I want to mirror over the project type from the projects board, I can do. And it's really, really simple to do. So that's quite a cool feature. Now, there's nothing additional that I really want to note regarding columns. The next thing that I often get asked is there sub items for sub items? So can I then extend again? Now, the short answer is no. The kind of answer is there are applications on the marketplace that kind of allow you to do it, but in my opinion, they're pretty atrocious. And the best alternative answer is you can use checklists. So if you press the plus button on this option here, so do you see this like a chat-esque feature? What you can do is you can create checklists for a sub item. So you click into the updates option, and then on the right hand side you've got this checklist feature, and then this is a task, hit enter. This is also a task, hit enter, and this is final checklist task. And that is unfortunately the best we can do. So we would then hit update, and then you can see that you've got a checklist associated with the sub items. And what's really nice is you get this feature here where it kind of shows 0 out of 3 is completed. If I then click into this and then mark a couple off, you can see how that then begins to update and shows 2 of 3 are completed. The issue you do have is there's no data that you can track. It's definitely not the same as a sub item. And also if there are a series of stages, you know, there are limitations. But this, to an extent, does allow you to track past the sub-item level as well. And then once I tick all of them off, you can see that that checklist updates, and we've got a nice green smiley, 3 of 3 are done, a smiley face there. Cool. So hopefully that answers that question about the extension of sub-items within sub-items. The next common thing that people want to know or are actually unaware of is showing the summary on the parent item. So what we're allowed to do, or what we're able to do, is let's say we take the status column, as this is a typical use case. We can use this function here where we show summary on parent item. Now that mirrors up all of the different statuses for each of the sub items onto the parent item. So if we've got, let's say, 20 parent items on our tasks board, and we just want to quickly know what the status of all of our sub items are for each of the parent items, as opposed to having to open up the sub items and scroll through, we can easily see the status on the parent item here using the summary function. So if I then go ahead and open this and add example sub item number 3, hit enter, and I'll change this status to doing, you can see how that doing. Yeah, there we go. That's what we're after. Doing, you can see how that then updates accordingly. Now you can do this for other options as well. So you could do this for effort if you wanted to, and then manage your effort this way. This is potentially a better alternative if you're getting into effort and capacity. And then of course you can kind of test this out as you so wish. But now you know that the feature is there. 3-dotted button, show summary on parent item. And again, you can do this for most columns on the sub items board. So that is a massive time saver and often something people are not aware of. Now, the next interesting or exciting thing that you're probably going to want to know is automating sub items. Now, you can go really down a rabbit hole with this, but I'm going to show you some basic automations and then some more advanced automations that are available to you on a sub item level. So if you go to automate in the top right hand corner and then go to create automation again, top right hand corner, what we can do is we can do some triggers and actions to automatically create sub items. So if we say when a new item is created, then we want to create sub item, which is often very important. So when a new project is created, and let's say it's a standardized project and the sub items associated with that project are always the same, or it's onboarding, for example, you don't want to manually have to create those sub items every single time. So when an item is created, then create a sub item, and I can just call this example sub item number 4 and hit enter. And then you can assign an owner from here. You can select the status. Obviously it's going to be to do. Now due date does get slightly more complicated, and I'll come on to that in a moment's time. We've got priority, so let's say this task is critical. We can define the effort as being, let's say, half a day here. We're not going to associate anything else for the time being. And then what we could do is go ahead and then create another sub item. So it'd be sub item example number 5. And we could go in sub item example number 5, and then again same principle applies. We can assign it to different people. Due date we can't really do anything about. Let's say this is a medium and the effort is 2 days, and then we could go ahead and press create automation. So now every time a new item is created, and I'm just going to do this obviously on the parent item, not the sub item level, so just write in example parent item number 1. Yeah, sure, that will do, as opposed to my really important task. And then what will happen is those automations will run and automatically create the 2 sub items that we asked the automation to create. You can see here it's putting in the information really easily. Now, if you want to change your trigger, you can do. So if we go to automate again, at the moment it's when an item is created. Alternatively, you could do a create automation and say when status, and then let's say a status of some description changes to something, then it creates the sub items. Alternatively, what you might want to do is when an item is created and then add a filter and say, and only if, let's say, status is equal to doing or priority is equal to something, let's say critical, then create the sub items. Now, quite often a use case for this would be if you are a service-based business and you offer different services and then the onboarding is different per service, then you would have when an item is created and only if service status column is equal to service 1, then create these sub items. And then you could duplicate this exact formula and then say, and only if service is equal to service 2, and then just change the sub items accordingly. So options like that are available to you as well for just creating sub items automatically within Monday.com, which is obviously a highly requested function. So the next thing you're probably wondering is, well, the sub item gets created, but then I want to set the date to today. Okay, so, or at least the due date, and this is where it does get slightly more complicated. All right, so if we go to automate in the top right hand corner and go to create automations, what we need to do is we need to set a rule as when sub item created, not an item created. So when sub item created, then we set the date, and it's going to be the due date on the sub item level, so make sure you include that as today. Now what you can then do is once you set it as today, you can then push that date. So you go push date, and then you can push it by X number of days. So obviously you're pushing the due date by, let's say, 5 business days, for example, and then set. But this then assumes a blanket rule. Okay, so this is both good and bad. So I'm going to go ahead and create another example parent item. So call this example parent item number 2. Oh dear, what's going on? Number 2, dealing with the euro here. So now both those sub items are going to automatically create, as you can see here. Both the due dates are going to be set to today and then pushed by 5 working days. But this is happened exactly the same for both sub items, and this will continue to happen the same for every single sub item that ever gets created with an automation. So even if I'm doing it manually, so manual sub item, you can see how that then also runs, right? So it's going to automatically set the due date to today and then push for 5 days time, 5 working days time. So that can be good if all of the onboarding tasks need to be done at exactly the same time, but quite often they cascade. So one sub item can only be done when the other's done, and the due dates need to reflect that, and so on and so forth. Now, unfortunately, there are no way of auto linking dependencies using automations, which is a bit of a frustration, but you can do this manually. So it's not the end of the world, right? But I will come on to how we can make this due date function slightly more advanced or tweak it. This is obviously the increasing levels of complexity throughout the video. Now, one other thing that I did want to touch on was auto checklists as well. So you saw earlier, we created our own checklist, and we unfortunately had to do that manually. What we can do is we can automatically create our own checklist. So what we need to do is we need to create a status column or a numbers column. It kind of doesn't matter. It's one of the two. And the numbers column is an indicator that a particular checklist needs to be created for this sub item. So I'm just going to call this, let's say, checklist trigger. Okay, checklist trigger. And what we're essentially going to have to tell Monday.com, and yes, this does begin to get a bit ridiculous, but we need to go to automate in the top right hand corner, create a new automation, and then we say when sub item created, and then we need a filter that then says, and only if number being the checklist trigger, and then is equal to, and let's say 1 in this instance, then we need to create an update, and then the update is where we can go ahead and write in our checklist. Now, you can try and do this with ChatGPT, or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste the code in that would create the checklist options. You can see here we've got like the different tasks, task 1, task 2. You might want to screenshot this and then copy it and then just paste it into ChatGPT, enter in the tasks that you're looking to format, because it is quite complicated to write, and then you should be all right. But what you can do is just press done and then press update automation. And now the only other thing that we need to do is we need to go to a sub item that we're automatically creating, and then say, let's say, then create a sub item and then create a sub item, and go to this one and make sure that the checklist has a value. So we obviously added that checklist column a moment ago, and then we're going to go ahead and let's say 1 for this particular instance, because the previous automation that we've created says when an item is created and only if checklist trigger is equal to 1, then create an update with this text. So then close this down, and then I'm going to go ahead and press or search or enter in press parent item number 3, and then hit enter. And then what's going to happen is it's going to create both of those sub items associated with that parent item, but where the checklist trigger is equal to 1, then it's created a checklist automatically, and we can click into this and then tick off, let's say, task 1, and that will update accordingly. So that, again, often people do not know about this, and I think there are many people in the world that know about this. I think I'm probably one of the few that's sad enough to know, but that is then possible, and you can do that just using some basic HTML code. Like I said, have a look at this. You can copy it, paste it. I might even put it in the description, although I can't make any promises that I will remember to do so. And then just tell ChatGPT, this is what I want to add. These are the changes I want to make, and it should be really self-explanatory, and I'm sure everyone now has access to ChatGPT. So hopefully that helps. The next thing that I want to cover is the sequencing of sub items. Okay, so obviously we have example sub item number 4 and then example sub item number 5. Now what I want to say is when sub item 4 is created, we want to set the due date for 5 days time, but sub item number 5, I actually want it to be 5 days after sub item number 4. Now what we need to do in order to make this possible is add a new column and just create a numbers column, and we'll call this column sub item sequencing, or just sequencing to keep things sequencing. Yeah, there we go, sequencing to keep things consistent. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to go to automate in the top right hand corner, and then we want to go to the automation that we created that automatically creates the sub items. So go to sub item number 1, and I'm going to set this as sequence number 1, and then sub item number 2 is going to be sequence number 2. Okay, and then just press update automation, and then we'll just go back and I'm just going to run you through it just to keep it simple. So we go example parent item number 4, yeah, hit enter, and then what's going to happen, as you can see, is sub item number 1 is going to be sequence number 1, or number 1 in the sequence, right? And then sub item number 2, or sub item example number 5, is going to be sequence number 2. So what we then need to do, and this is where it does get a little bit more elaborate, and unfortunately there's no easier way of doing this really, is we go to automate in the top right hand corner, and then we go to create automation, and then we're going to say when sub item created, and only if number meets condition, and the number being the sequencing and is equal to, and then let's say 1, then we're going to set the date of that particular sub item as today, set the due date as today, and then we're going to push this date by 5 days. Okay, push the due date by 5 days. Okay, I'm just going to put business days. So now we have, when the sub item is created, the sub item that has the sequence number 1 is going to be set to be due in 5 days time. And then what we want to do is, and the easiest way of doing this is just duplicating this. And then we're going to say when a sub item is created and only if sub item sequence is equal to, and then in this instance it's going to be number 2, then we don't want it to be 5 business days time, because we don't want it to copy. We're actually going to set this to 10 business days time. Okay, or not 105. That gives you plenty of breathing space to get this task done. So then go ahead and press create automation. Now just be mindful, earlier on we were messing with some other automations with, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn this off, or probably what I will do is just delete it, just to make sure that I don't forget. So we've now got this new function that when a sub item is created and only if sub item sequencing is equal to 1, set due date to today and push by 5 days, and then if it's number 2 by 10 days. Okay. So now I'm going to create an example parent number 5, example parent item number 5, hit enter. And what's going to happen is the due dates are going to be different because of the sequencing. So both of them will be set to today. This one will be pushed by 5 working days, and this one is going to be pushed by 10 working days. You can see how they're now different. Unfortunately, and it would be really nice if we could automatically set dependencies. I might just double check later on in the video that we can't do that. But now we can see that this sub item is slightly further ahead as a due date than this sub item, and you can continue to do this for as long as you need to. So if you go back to your automations and then you go create sub item, let's say there's a third sub item that you want to create as part of the onboarding process, for example. I'm just going to call this example sub item number, I think we're on number 6 here. And then just make sure the sequencing is equal to number 3 in this particular instance, and then just hit update automation. Obviously you can fill out additional information where it needs be. And then what we can do is we can just duplicate this again. So duplicate, and then change the equal to as equal to 3 as opposed to 2. And then the business days, obviously it's not going to be 10, it might be, let's say 20 business days. And then just press set, then press create automation. So now if you create a parent item, it's going to create 3 sub items. Parent item number 6, hit enter. It's going to create a new 3 sub items, all the sequencing automatically formatted. So 1, 2, and 3. And you can see now that the 12th is automatically set. You've got the 19th, and then you have the 3rd of July, and that's all automatic, completely via the automation functions. And again, this is not really something that people readily know within Monday.com. Now, the next thing that I'm going to cover is one sub item being created when the previous one is marked as done. So quite often, well, not quite often, but sometimes people only want one sub item to appear once the previous one is done. So imagine I mark done on this one, and then number 5 gets created, and then the due date is set to in 5 days time, as opposed to using the current function that we have. So I'm going to walk you through that as well. So we go to automate in the top right hand corner, and I'm just going to turn these off for the time being. So when an item is created, and only if, yeah, turn that off, turn that off, turn that off. Oh, probably want to turn this one off as well. When an item is created, and only if, yeah, turn that one off, and we'll leave the checklist one on for the time being. So now we're essentially saying when a new parent item is created, we want the first sub item to be created, but we don't want any of the others to be created until the first one in the sequence is done. Then the second one in the sequence is created, and then only when the second one in the sequence is marked as done does the third one create. Okay, so we're going to continue to use our sequencing function, as that's quite important, but what we're going to do instead is go to automate in the top right hand corner. And then we're going to go back to our when an item is created, create a sub item stuff, delete the bottom 2, just make sure that this is obviously the sequence is equal to 1, and just press update automation. Then we can turn that back on again. So let me just show you where we're at now. So example parent item number 7, hit enter, just close this down and then just open this up. You can see here there's only one sub item created. The due date function is not turned on at the moment. What we might look to do is actually just turn the due date function on for the first item sequencing. So again, we would continue with that as per. I'm not going to retest it again. But what I want to happen is when the status changes to done, then the next item in the sequence is then automatically created. So to do that, what we want to do is we want to go to automate in the top right hand corner and then go to create automation. And then we just want to create a new trigger. So when status changes, and the status is obviously the sub item status, changes to done, and then go add automation, add option, or this is essentially a filter. And we're saying where number and then the number sequencing is equal to 1, then we want to go ahead and create sub item, and then this sub item is going to be sub item number 2. So this is example sub item number 5, I think we're at. I might have to revert to our numbers. And then what we want to do is just make sure that this, because this is sub item number 2, the sequence is number 2. Okay, and then just press create automation. And then we're going to do exactly the same. So we go create automation and then go when status, and then the status being the sub item changes to done, and only if the number, and then the number being the sequencing, is equal to, and then the amount being number 2 this time, not number 1, then create sub item. Okay, and then the sub item probably be, I think it's example sub item number 5 or 6. I give up now. And then this sequence number for this would be number 3, because this is sub item number 3, right? And then go ahead and press create automation. Now, the other thing that you want to take into consideration is the date column. So let me just show you where we're at the moment. So I'm just going to create example parent item number 8, hit enter. And what will happen is now, if I open this up, this will create sub item number 1. It's not going to create any of the other sub items yet. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the status to done on sub item number 4, and that will then trigger sub item number 5 to be created, as you can see here. And then if I change this to done, which I'm going to now, that will then trigger sub item number 6 to automatically be created. Now you'll notice here we've got a date column issue. Now, what I would typically recommend doing in this particular instance is just have a blanket rule of when the previous sub item is done, then set the due date to today and then push it by 5 days. And I would just do this for all of them. So we're assuming that every time this is done, the previous task is done, then the next one is going to be due in another 5 days time, or another 5 working days time. That's going to apply. Now, if that's not necessarily the case, you just need to tweak and optimize accordingly. So we'll do the basic one first. So we'll go to automate, top right hand corner. And then we got when an item is created and only if sub item sequencing is equal to 1, set sub item due date to today. What we can do is just click into this and remove the filter. So we're saying when a sub item is created, then set the sub item due date to today, and then push due date by 5 days. This applies for all of your sub items, and then just hit update automation. And then we can go ahead and close this down. So now if I just go ahead and create example parent item number 9, hit enter, and then the drop down menu the sub item should then automatically load the first one, sets the due date to today and then plus 5 days. And then let's assume, well, we can't assume because I can't literally time travel, but if I change this to tomorrow, then it would set the date as tomorrow's date and then plus 5 days automatically. Now, if there are instances where let's say sequence number 3 is going to take considerably longer, then what you could do is you could go to when a sub item is created and then add a filter and then go, and only if number is not is equal to let's say sequencing is equal to number 3, then we change this to, let's say, 10 days, and we just have this as this automation. And then otherwise it would be exactly the same. So what I would literally do is just duplicate this. I've kind of done this a little bit backwards, but I would just delete this. When a sub item is created, sub item due date to today, and push by 5 days by standard. There you go, 5 days as standard, set, and then create automation. So when a sub item is created, set due date by 5 business days. But no, this isn't going to work because it's going to do both. So either you've got to commit to one or the other. Either you have tasks that all have exactly the same due date terms, and that's going to be when the sub item is created 5 days after, it automatically sets the due date, or you do it individual by sequence number. So it's entirely up to you, but I'm just trying to think logically here. This isn't going to work for both, so I'm just going to go ahead and for the time being delete this one and then just delete that permanently. So obviously we've got pretty advanced with sub items. You probably didn't anticipate there was so much to learn about them, but yeah, there is a lot to do with sub items. Obviously there's more nuance to this as well. A couple of honorable mentions that I think is probably worth covering in this video today. If you click on a sub item, you can actually convert it to a parent item. So if you click on one, you've got the convert option down here, and then you can convert it, and then you continue anyway, and you need to map the sub item columns to the parent item columns. As you can see, there are a few that match, and just press move item. It will warn you if stuff's like not going to go across or you're going to lose data, but you can see how that then converts. You can also convert it back again, or you can convert any item that hasn't got sub items associated back in. So if I want to put example sub item and then just move it across like we've just done, you can see how that then sits back underneath again. So hopefully that makes sense. We've then got a couple of other automations that I think is worth mentioning. So if we go to automate in the top right hand corner, and then as opposed to we're being on the manage page, we want to go to create here, and then just search for sub item. So we've got two that I think are really worth mentioning here. We've got when all sub items of an item have status of something, change the item status to something. So if you think about this logically, when all sub items have the status of equal to being done, then it updates the parent item status to being done. So if we just go ahead and create that automation, and then we'll go to this one here, for example, and you can see that this status for the parent item is currently to do. If I change this then to done, this should then, with the automation, trigger the parent item to automatically be set as done, which is really, really helpful. Okay, so that's worth mentioning. The other one, if we go to automate sub items again, just search sub item, when all sub items of an item have the status to something, so exactly the same, the action is then to notify someone as opposed to changing the item status to something. So when all sub items are done, then notify X person. So that's definitely possible. And then the other stuff that's worth mentioning is integration. So if you do plan on doing any integrations, you have actually quite a lot of webhook flexibility. So when an item is created, when any sub item column changes, when a sub item is deleted, when a sub item name changes, and when a new update is posted on a sub item. What I would typically often use is when any sub item column changes, and then inside of, let's say I'm using Zapier, I would then use some filter functionality to say, and only if the column is equal to, and then if you go into here, you can go on to like developer mode, and then you can go ahead and get, let's say, the unique ID for that particular column. Again, this is getting a lot more complicated now. And then the final thing that's probably worth speaking on is just the app marketplace for Monday.com. Now, if you ever get to a point where you're struggling to achieve the thing that you're trying to do within the sub items function of Monday, and you don't have a third-party integration tool, then it might be worth you looking at the app marketplace. So if you go to automate again, and go to create, and then just search sub items, what you will notice is if you scroll down, you've got this apps area. You can see you've got auto boost. There are a few others, in fact quite a lot of different sub item apps. So these apps are owned by other companies but put on the marketplace. Think of like iPhone and the App Store. It's like the same principle, and then they will allow you to have a lot more control and flexibility over the way the sub items behave. So you might, for instance, be able to connect using dependencies, using the apps and stuff like that, but I'm not going to go into too much detail. There's loads of different apps on the marketplace. Unfortunately, you will have to pay for them. Such is life. But if you can do like trials, or just like you can get a free version to start with, test it out, see if it's working for you, and then if it does, it probably would be worth investing in. So that's pretty much everything there is to know about sub items. Hopefully you have learned at least a decent amount about what is possible. Like I said, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We would love to help. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.